Well, welcome. My name is Mark Aylward, and I'm here with my friend and colleague Jeff Otis. And Jeff and I are have become pretty good friends over the last few years. We met on LinkedIn. I'll let Jeff tell you that story. But what we're going to talk about today is leadership, and we'll get specific about what components of leadership. But Jeff, why don't you say hello?
Hello, everyone. My name's Jeff Otis, as Mark mentioned. And yeah, Mark and I met on LinkedIn a couple of years ago and started collaborating on some projects and training and helping companies develop leaders and developing individuals as leaders. And we've continued the conversations and then came across the idea of starting to record some of these and sharing them with you in the event that, you can take something positive away from this and, develop as a leader in your own life.
Yeah, Jeff, I really appreciate your willingness to do this. I think, and I've said it to you before many times, I think there's a dearth of leadership in the country there, and so we feel both of us kind of feel an obligation to say, look, we've spent 30 some odd years developing leaders in slightly different capacities, but we do have some similar background, both been in a technical recruiting space. I was for most of my career an owner operator of technical staffing company, two of them that I built and sold. And Jeff, what give us the context of your professional
Yeah, very,
experience?
very similar. I spent about 15 years in the employment, staffing, recruiting industry, and over that period of time, probably interviewed about 12,000 people, worked with hundreds of thousands of leaders around the country, and, ultimately responsible for about 20,000 employees. And so I was constantly in the mix of, developing everyone as leaders, as good humans, as, productive and, satisfied employees. Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of the work that I did was developing leaders as well. And I count four, I think, people that left my nest and started their own thing and became millionaires themselves. And it's a proud thing to be able to say. I love training people. I love teaching people. I think Jeff, you and I decided today the kind of subtopic was going to be, what does success look like today? How do you define success? And this is, in my estimation, not just for younger people that are just starting out, but it's also for people in mid-career and midlife. Anyone who has aspirations of being a leader, I think you, we both kind of agreed that you start that conversation with yourself by saying, what is success? What's my target? What's my North Star?
Yeah. I think it's, when you look at today's world, it's one of the most difficult things to define. In a lot of the workshops I do, I start with asking a group of, whether it's young adults or seasoned leaders, the first question I ask them is just, what does good leadership look and feel like?
Yep.
Right. And if
Yep.
you can imagine, there's a myriad of responses. Uh, and then I ask always the question, what do good leaders have in common? What are
Mm-hmm.
sort of the habits and the traits and the characteristics that stand out? And I hear people say, they need to be empathetic, good communicators. They need to have a vision. They need to, be motivating and caring and support. You hear all these different words that describe it, but at the end of the day, the art of leadership is really about moving yourself or moving a team toward a common vision. So I think that's why we agreed to kind of talk about the importance of developing that vision for yourself and really creating that definition of success. But in
Yep.
today's world, that's a difficult, it can be difficult to do.
Yeah, there's a lot of noise out there, that's for sure. I think that success, I was talking to another colleague of mine about the word happiness. And we kind of concluded that why don't we substitute the word fulfillment? And I think part of being successful is being fulfilled. And you could kind of jump down that rabbit hole, I suppose, for a while. But one of the things that I do still is I coach people that are making some sort of professional change, some level of advance. Sometimes it's changing jobs, getting a promotion, anything that would go into professional development. And I begin the conversations inevitably, almost always, Jeff. It's crazy saying, what do you do, and why do you do it? And I find a lot of people don't self-reflect professionally ever. And so when I start with somebody, I'm typically asking them what they do, and they're a little bit confused when I ask them why they do it. And some of them do it, many of them do it because somebody told them early on in life, a guidance counselor, a teacher, a coach, a parent. And it wasn't that they didn't have their best interests at heart. It was that they didn't really know enough about what success was looking like to that particular individual when they gave them that advice. So I don't know. What do you think when you hear that question? How do you define success, Jeff?
Yeah, like I said, it's a difficult one to define. And honestly, I think it changes over the course of a lifetime, right? And when I've often done similar coaching or working with people through what I call transformative type moments, we often I just identify what does success look like, let's say 5 years from today,
Mm-hmm.
or 10 years from today, something they can tangibly wrap around and start to develop a vision that they feel is achievable and doable within that time frame. But yeah, I mean, it's a tough question to define success, especially with all the different influences coming at us. And from a very little age, we grow up in a world with just mass media influences, the success of our parents, success of others around us.
Mm-hmm.
Social media sort of introduced this constant comparison. Am I moving
Yeah.
fast enough? Am I staying up with everybody? And I mean, we know at some point we learn, I get suppose, that it's really everybody's highlight reel, right? So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like
It
how do you
is.
stay up with it?
Yeah, it's challenging. But as you're talking, I'm thinking to myself that probably the most important part is to just start the conversation. It's just like if you commit to having the conversation with yourself, and then maybe gathering inputs or opinions of others that maybe love and trust, which is that can be a double-edged sword too. Um, but I think starting the conversation with yourself is just like you have permission to do that. And then
Yep.
as soon as you give yourself permission, in from my perspective, you start to think of things. Sometimes you think of material things. Sometimes you think of physical things, maybe family related things. I want to get married. I want to have kids. I want to have a house. I want to have a car. Once the conversation gets going, is for me, it starts to redefine itself because you'll say something to yourself, say, well, I thought that might be important, but when I said it out loud, it didn't sound that important. Maybe I should, redirect my conversation. And to
Yep.
as you said many times, Jeff, it's not a static thing that you decide one day and it never changes.
Yeah, no, I mean, every once in a while you find that purpose, of course, that you can create that purpose that you're moving towards. But even as you go through life and continue to learn, that's going to adjust and evolve and change, especially as, sort of life throws you those unexpected moments. But yeah, one of the things you were just saying that, is kind of resonating with me is that, and especially true over my career, was just that sort of challenge people had with looking deep enough within to really define success on their terms.
Mm-hmm.
One of the exercises I often run people through is just starting with, what is your unique strength
Mm-hmm.
and getting the input of others and having them sort of reflect and describe that back, so that you've got a good perspective on where you're starting. And then I think as you develop that vision of success, I think one of the downfalls throughout our education system right now, I think one of the downfalls is success is so measured by what we do as a career.
Mm-hmm.
That's often how we define it. And I think what's more important is really to look at your life holistically and say, hey, 5 years from today, what do I want? What's success really mean to me in all these different areas of life? And I think when you start to do that, your leadership skills holistically begin to, develop at a greater degree.
One of you just triggered something in me. Maybe that's the wrong word. That has a negative connotation because this is not negative. This is positive. But I went through an exercise and I can't remember who recommended it to me, but it was part of what you just said. And I recommend is reach out. I think reached out to about 10 close friends slash colleagues. And I said, would you do me a favor and just with a couple of sentences, can you email me back so I have it in writing? What do you think my superpower is? And I tell you, Jeff, I got back some incredibly helpful feedback that helped me with my messaging, helped me with my own confirmed for me a couple of things, and I also got some really positive comments that I got. If you hadn't told me that, I would not have thought I had such an influence on you. And it didn't take long at all. People were very cooperative, very willing to help. And the feedback I ended up with was very valuable. I just thought of that when you were talking.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's a very valuable exercise. If you really think about achieving success, you're always going to need the help of others at some point, right?
Mhm.
Whether that team is big or small, and how people perceive you is incredibly important
Mhm.
in terms of following you as a leader. And
Mhm.
so I think sort of getting that measurement or that feedback on occasion, it's just a good reminder of where you're at right now
Yep.
in terms of those strengths that you can put to work. I'm curious, what did they say? What was there sort of a theme that you heard in terms of the feedback?
Well, I feel like I'm being pompous by by answering that, but I'll answer it anyway.
Well, the question is, what is your super strength? So it should be something positive, right?
Yeah, I suppose so. I suppose so. Yeah, most of it was around communication. I was lauded as a very good communicator, and then they listed the qualities of the communication. Empathy was one, good listener was one, sense of humor was one. Um, ability to contextualize things. I wish I pulled it up for our recording here, but it was around communication, and then there were some other nice things about integrity and accountability and things of that nature. So, yeah, it was great. It was great.
Yeah, no, I similarly, when I asked the question, what was reflected back to me was I was described as a calm in a storm, right?
Yeah,
The ability to sort of pause and, and look at a process and work our way through that process. But I attributed that a lot of that just to athletics, and I was a baseball pitcher growing up, and just
yep,
working your way through the innings of a game is very similar to working your way through the chapters of life. But
yeah. Team sports is great fodder for leadership conversations and communication stuff. Yeah, I think what Jeff and I are going to do. The plan is we're going to produce some of these videos. I don't know if it's going to be 5 or 10 or 15, but it's going to all be around leadership. We're going to try and keep them between 10 and 15 minutes so they're easily digestible. And we're going to try and make it so that we give out at least one good piece of executable advice. And I think that exercise would be my vote, Jeff, of reaching out to 5 or 10 colleagues and friends and saying, what's my superpower? And I do it in an email. I would suggest if you have a conversation, then you got to take notes and write it down. You might forget. You have to recontextualize it. But that would be my kind of takeaway.
Yeah, 100%. I think sending that via email or text, just real simple. Hi, hi, I could use a little help. And, I could, would love to hear your feedback on what you think my super strength is, kind of that strength above all others that you might think comes naturally for me.
Yeah.
You know,
And
and
for anyone who's reticent to do that, um, I'm telling you, I was overwhelmed in a very positive. Two things: how kind people were, and how willing they wanted to be to help, and then how quickly they responded.
yeah.
So for what it's worth, if you had any doubts about that or that intimidates you at all, my experience was just bold.
Yeah. And if you don't mind, I'm going to add one other quick exercise to consider as you do that. And the exercise is really just write down 10 to 20 bullet points that reflect what success really looks like to you as an individual or you as a small team or a large team just 5 to 10 years from now. What does we want you to start thinking holistically about how am I going to position myself to be a leader in life and the lives of others.
Good stuff. Well, thanks, Jeff. That was enjoyable.